Finally, after all this time, the perennial weapon of sorrow, the mighty Thorn exotic hand cannon has made its way back into the world of Destiny 2. What's going on, Guardians? My name is the Black Link, and today we're going to be reviewing that oh so mighty of Year 1 weapons and giving our thoughts on the Thorn in PvE, PvP, and beyond. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Now, first things first, Thorn is tied to the exotic quest Independent Study, which you can start off by collecting the melted hunk of metal in a campsite near the salt mines in the EDZ. We've actually already got a full guide video on the Thorn up already, so if you need to check that out, there will be a link to it in the description box below. The Thorn comes with the intrinsic ability Mark of the Devourer. Rounds pierce targets and deal damage over time. Kills with this weapon leave behind remnants. This ties directly into Thorn's new ability, the Soul Devourer. Absorbing a remnant strengthens Mark of the Devourer and partially refills the magazine. So, how does all this work? Well, shots with Thorn will apply a dot that ticks 4 times for damage, and anytime you get a kill with Thorn, it will leave behind a green, floating kind of hive-like object. This is a remnant. Once spawned, these will last about 7 seconds, and can be picked up to start the Soul Devourer's special ability. This buff will grant you 4 additional rounds directly to your magazine, plus a supercharged bonus to your dot damage. This bonus is actually pretty significant, resulting in greatly increased damage over time. But it is important to note that only the dot damage increases here, not the damage of your initial shot. The Soul Devourer buff initially lasts for about 6 seconds, but can be extended up to 10 seconds by picking up another remnant. The Mark of the Devourer dot can be stacked up to around 5 times on a target, allowing you to push out some surprisingly massive amounts of damage on tanky enemies. Not to mention the fact that Thorn's shot actually over-penetrates targets, so you can line up ads in PvE and tear through them, applying dots everywhere. And that's really kind of where the Thorn surprised me here. We all expected it to be a good PvP weapon, but I am really surprised at just how effective Thorn is in PvE. The Soul Devourer buff really shines in activities where there are a lot of enemies, as you'll be making good use of Thorn's dot to tear through red bars, while stacking big damage against mages and shielded foes. Thorn is especially good at popping enemy shields and keeping them from regenning without the need to swap to a special weapon. Just pop a few shots and the dot handles the rest. And I really kind of found myself running entire strikes without switching away from my primary due to just how good it is at shredding ads and keeping its own abilities going. The Soul Devourer buff even covers what I would consider to be Thorn's only real weak point here, its reload speed. Since you gain 4 additional rounds straight to your active magazine when you grab the remnant, it keeps you from having to reload at all, creating an incredibly fun loop of blasting enemies away, getting the buff, and then continuing your rampage to keep that buff active. And if you still find yourself dealing with the slow reload, well, of course there are armor perk ways to remedy that, so the only real negative here to using Thorn in PvE is simply the fact that you have to give up an exotic slot for it. Bungie really did an incredible job of making Thorn more than viable in the PvE landscape. It's just a really solid primary weapon that's a lot of fun to play with. Seriously, head out and give it a shot in whatever PvE activity you want. It tears through all kinds of enemies. It's simply a joy to play with. In PvP, Thorn is a solid hand cannon with decent stats that put it as a strong mid-range gun. There are a lot of really good options in PvP right now, even just among hand cannons, but Thorn definitely has some pretty big things going for it. Without the Soul Devourer buff active, Thorn deals about 68 to the head and 43 to the body, while the dot will deal 8 damage total over 4 ticks, allowing the gun to kill in 2 crit shots and 1 body shot for an optimal time to kill of about 0.8 seconds, which is very competitive with some of the other top tier options out there. With the buff active, the dot shoots up to 7 damage per tick, meaning on Guardians with 6 resilience or below, you can actually 2-tap them to the head and let the dot do the rest. This is an incredible utility in PvP for Thorn, harkening way back to the glory days of Destiny 1 Year 1. But it still isn't something you're likely to get too much use out of. In order to get into this situation, not only do you have to get a kill first to spawn a remnant, but once you pick that up, you'll only have 6 seconds to secure that 2-tap while the buff is still active. Believe me, it's still a powerfully unique ability for Thorn, but if you're worried about it being too OP for Crucible, don't be. It's not going to be something that sees a ton of play in PvP. As a hand cannon, Thorn works really well in the 150 RPM tier, with a beautifully vertical climb for its recoil. But if you're on console or are a controller user on PC, the 180s are still king, baby. Lunas and Not Forgottens are overall still better performing weapons, and their consistency is something that Thorn ultimately lacks. I'm not sure whether it's Bloom or what, but Thorn is not something you'll be able to spam the trigger with and win. Rapid follow-up shots sometimes seem to disappear off into the aether, so with Thorn, you'll often need to pace your shots out if you want them to land at all. Still, it is a very good weapon that performs well in mid-range, where the dot pressure can secure you some really great kills. This actually ties in with an interesting mode of play with Thorn in PvP, as you can land those shots and choose to walk away from an encounter, knowing that you've secured a kill with the remaining dot damage. Or you could continue to be aggressive and try to land that extra shot to get the kill right then and there. Either option is going to have its risks, as attempting to disengage could land you in trouble since gap closing is very easy these days. And with the speed of the game, a Titan can be right on top of you just like that. And of course, managing the Soul Devourer buff presents a similar issue. The Remnant lasts a little bit after you get a kill, so it's a good idea to not always rush straight to them when they drop, as that will oftentimes land you in a bad spot where enemy players can get the jump on you. Seriously, I cannot tell you the number of times I get a kill, get super excited about the Remnant popping up, I jump out to go get it, and I get double teamed by 2 other enemies that were waiting off screen. Thankfully though, the Remnants do track you when you're a few meters away, so that helps, but you'll still need to learn to manage the Remnant drops and when to grab them if you want to make use of the Soul Devourer's potent ability in PvP. Overall, the Thorn is a fantastic exotic weapon for both PvP and PvE. Its strong ability gives it plenty of utility in both game modes, and it's a lot of fun, but it isn't perfect or unbeatable in either. In PvP, there are some better, more consistently performing options out there that outclass the neutral game of Thorn. But when you get on a roll and that Soul Devourer perk goes live, Thorn becomes one of the strongest, if not the strongest of the bunch, with a great ability and more than decent performance to boost. Look, if you're considering getting this weapon, I would highly recommend it. It's definitely worth the grind. Except in Gambit. Don't use Thorn in Gambit because it means you're not using Lord of Wolves. But that about wraps things up. Those are my thoughts on the Thorn Exotic Hand Cannon. Be sure to leave me yours down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like and make sure you subscribe for more Destiny 2 content. That's it for this one. Thank you Guardians so much for watching. And as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.